All right, well, thanks everyone for your interest in the King Conservation District Seattle Community Partnership Grant Program, supporting natural resource improvements and environmental justice projects and work in the community. My name is Chris Iberly. I'm with the Office of Sustainability and Environment with the City of Seattle, and we help coordinate this grant program with the King Conservation District to support community-led work in Seattle, working on natural resource improvements and environmental justice. We'll go through a bit of the overview of KCD and City of Seattle OSC's work on natural resources and environmental equity, and talk a bit about the ins and outs of the grant program, and then have some time at the end to answer a couple questions. So King Conservation District, Jessica Saavedra was the main staff person that coordinates with City of Seattle on this grant program. KCD focuses on building better ground. They do that by providing information and assistance related to water quality, soil health, forest management, supporting the local food system, and working with communities and individuals to implement natural resource improvements and actions in their backyards. Just a little bit about how this grant program works or where the funding comes from, especially. King Conservation District funding as a whole comes from a flat rate that ranges from $10 to $13 per land parcel per year, not based on property value. That funding gets collected by King County with other taxes and funds and supports and resources, KCD's programs and services. So one thing they do with those funds, a portion of those are allocated to grant programs based on the number of parcels and rates paid in the city. So each city and member jurisdiction of the district receives and gets back some of those funds from KCD to support environmental work in their community. So the Seattle version, this program is unique because the portion of the rates that are paid by residents go back to the city, and the King Conservation District has 35 different jurisdictions that, excluding Federal Way, Enumclaw, Milton, Pacific, and Skykomish, that returns funds to those districts to support environmental work. So we're talking today just for those projects that are located in the city of Seattle, and part of that is because of how the funding for this program works, is that it comes from those jurisdictions all across the county and then goes back into specific work and supporting communities within those cities and towns throughout the county. So if you're looking at projects or doing work that are outside of Seattle, there are other similar grant funding opportunities for natural resource projects in other areas of the county and other cities using their jurisdiction funds from the conservation district. So contact Jessica if you're outside of Seattle and doing some great work there to see what those other opportunities are. A bit about the Seattle's Office of Sustainability and Environment. We work on energy benchmarking and tune-up programs and building energy policy development. We work on climate justice through the Green New Deal to advance equitable clean energy transition and prioritize economic opportunities and invest in communities historically most impacted and harmed by economic, racial, and environmental injustices. Through the Equity and Environment Initiative work, and I'll talk a little bit more about how that work is advanced by this grant program. There's an environmental justice committee that we help coordinate that works on creating and advancing environmental programs with strong ownership and collaboration with communities of color and connections to supporting community-based solutions for environmental justice, particularly through the Environmental Justice Fund, which is another grant that just opened. And we've done some streamlining with that program too, with the King Conservation District Seattle Community Partnership grants, to have some shared streamlined application process. So some similar application questions if you're looking at applying for the Environmental Justice Fund. We also have a Duwamish Valley program that advances the city's environmental justice and equitable development goals in the Duwamish Valley, with an emphasis on South Park and Georgetown. Through food policy, our food policy and programs, we work on the Fresh Bucks program, which increases healthy food access for low-income folks. We coordinate a food action plan and are currently updating that for the first time since 2012 and going through that process. We coordinate the Sweetened Beverage Tax Community Advisory Board, and my other main role is actually on the Healthy Food in Schools partnership we have with Seattle Public Schools through our food policy programs. Transportation, we work on reducing car trips and increasing electrified transportation options, and have an urban forestry program working with multiple departments to advance citywide urban forestry goals and protect the tree canopy. So basic overview of the Seattle Community Partnership Grant Program. It's putting together both environmental justice goals and natural resource improvements. The goal is to invest and reinvest those member jurisdiction funds we talked about back into community-based organizations and community-led solutions. The way it works is City of Seattle. So our role is to facilitate the review process with community reviewers and staff and help with the application process, get the word out to folks like you all doing great environmental justice work in the community, and develop recommendations and submit those to King Conservation District. And when awards are made, King Conservation District administers the grant contracts throughout the projects, can be 12 to 24 months. So I'm one of the main coordinators, just a neutral facilitator of the review process, and we work with a grant review team that I'll talk a little bit about to evaluate proposals and make funding recommendations. This year, there's about $410,000 available in the funding pool, so that means most likely anywhere from 5 to 7 projects will be awarded up to $75,000. Projects can be multi-year, 12, 24 months or more. Projects need to be within the Seattle city limits. Nonprofit, Indigenous, or community organizations are able to apply, along with groups that have a fiscal sponsor, a 501c3 fiscal sponsor. Matching funds aren't required, but keep in mind it's a reimbursement-based grant, so it will reimburse for costs of staffing, equipment, and other project costs that you have after those are paid for. And then you submit reimbursement requests to KCD to receive the funding. There's a couple other, just make sure your location's eligible and that you're within the city of Seattle, along with if you're doing like property improvements or natural resource project that you want to do at a certain site or location, make sure you have permission from the property owner, whether that's a public or private owner of the land to do your project. And we have a template to ensure and get that verification from the property owner that you have permission to do the project at that location. The main natural resource priority areas, so focusing on, we look for projects that are focusing on managing and preventing pollution from stormwater runoff, protecting and restoring creeks, shorelines, and wetlands, improving soil health, restoring urban forests and other native plant stewardship efforts, and building a sustainable, equitable food system. There's a little more detail and explanation and definitions, examples of these in the grant guidelines PDF on the webpage if you want to read more about what some of these priority areas mean and what projects should focus on. And so the how projects work towards improving those natural resources with community efforts and benefiting communities most impacted by environmental inequities is through direct improvement. So, so improving soil or directly getting involved with restoration, environmental restoration at a green space, something like that. Education outreach to the public, to the community about how to have more better environmental impacts. Pilot and demonstration projects, so illustrating what could be a really successful environmental restoration or natural resource project, and capacity building for organizations, community-led organizations that are working on natural resource projects. So the goals and the grounding and foundation for the Seattle Community Partnership grants with KCD are grounded in the Equity Environment Initiative. So this is a partnership that started in 2015 between community-based nonprofits and leaders, the City of Seattle, across multiple departments. And the goals of the initiative are to ensure that all people and communities benefit from environmental work and Seattle's environmental progress and trying to be more sustainable and address climate justice and climate change. to ensure that communities most impacted by environmental injustice are part of setting environmental priorities, designing strategies, tracking progress, and implementing those environmental solutions, and to increase opportunities for most impacted communities to be part of and leaders in the environmental movement. So here's a few of the main ways that the agenda looks to advance these different goals. Working on healthy communities for all, ensuring clean, healthy, resilient, safe environments in places where communities of color, immigrants, refugees, people with low incomes, youth, and limited English speakers live, learn, work, and play, developing jobs and local economies, especially for youth, and developing more equity within city environmental programs and staffing and programming, and supporting environmental narratives and community leadership to have the movement led and centered by the stories and experiences of people most impacted by environmental issues. So again, communities of color, Black, Indigenous, and other people of color, immigrants, refugees, people with low incomes, youth, and folks with limited English. So just a few more nuts and bolts about the grant program. Here's a few of the allowed expenses, so things that can be a part of your project budget and proposal: salaries and benefits, food, especially when it's for events or volunteers, van rentals, transportation, some office supplies, tools, plants, materials for direct natural resource projects that you might be doing, food for the community, consultants, contractors, various types of equipment, and then some indirect costs up to 25% of salaries and benefits. We can't fund individuals, can't fund land acquisition or purchasing, construction capital, park benches, shelters, and sidewalks are not eligible for funding, and a couple of other like durable office equipment here. And if you have any questions about what's eligible or not eligible, definitely follow up with me or Jessica from KCD if you have questions about what's eligible or not. Here's a quick overview of the timeline. So applications and proposals will be due August 9th at 5 p.m. We'll be holding office hours over the next few weeks, especially in July and early August. If you want to set up a time to have one-on-one questions or advice, guidance on your proposal, we'll go through a proposal review process for a couple of months, have a time to send out questions to applicants from the review team if any clarifying questions are needed, and then trying to get to announce awards in December. So again, office hours is actually one of the new aspects we're introducing this year to give an opportunity if you want to set up just a one-on-one time with you or your grant team to talk with me and or Jessica, city or KCD staff, to get help with your application or discuss project ideas or ask questions, or help navigating the platform if you're having trouble with some of the technical aspects. You should be able to click this link here or go to the website and click on the link and sign up via Doodle to claim a time, to set up a time with us to talk for about 20 minutes about your proposal. Doodle has been having some trouble, so if you have any issues with you can just email me, chris.iberly@seattle.gov, to set up a time as well. Can go through a quick overview of what the application looks like. So hold on one moment. All right, so you should be seeing a preview of the application. It looks something like this. You'll get in, you'll see there's an initial section just about your organizational information, a little bit about whether you've received a KCD grant in the past. You'll have sections to input your project information, you know, how what your organization overview is, how you advance racial justice within your organization, a short project summary, a couple of details about where your project takes place, what neighborhood, and getting into alignment with the goals and priorities of the natural resource improvements that you might be taking on. And then some overview of the project, what is the need that you're addressing, how your community is being impacted, environmental inequities and natural resource issues, your project, what will you actually do with the KCD grant and how will you accomplish that? What priorities are you trying to address and how is your project going to work? What are you going to do as a part of the project? Here in the description, and then tell us about the people that are part of planning, leading, or implementing the project, who designed it, if that's any different, who will lead and implement the project, what are their backgrounds, and then tell us a bit about the outcomes and impacts you expect from your project. What are some of the major milestones you're going to work towards? What are the outcomes, some of the major outcomes? You don't have to go through a detailed list of each outcome, but pick a few of the major ones that you expect to accomplish, and what does a success look like? And there will be a work plan table where you will list out more specific list and timeline for what will happen when, with just a very brief summary of what those activities are, along with a budget table that you'll upload that'll outline each of the budget line items. And those are all downloadable from the web page, along with, for these sections in this platform, for the project information, there's also a Word document if you prefer to work in a Word document or paste it into a Google Doc before putting it into this platform to do editing and developing the proposal. There's a Word document that has all the prompts and questions for this narrative section there as well. And the thing to keep in mind, there's a character limit, which is unfortunately just part of the platform. So don't anticipate that you need to max out each of those character limits. It's just there as an upper end. And so if you're within a range of, we give a few ranges for kind of what character limits we might expect. And wanted to set the character limits pretty high so that there was a lot of flexibility to give you the flexibility to put in the information that you want to speak to about your project. But if you're short of 2,000 characters on some of these, that's also not a problem. All right, are folks seeing the slides again?
Yep.
Great. All right, so quick overview of the review process. So the grant review team actually consists of three city staff and 3 community members this year. That's kind of a new aspect. So folks all coming together that have strong environmental and racial equity backgrounds. There's some sample criteria here, but there's more detail in the grant guidelines for what a strong application would include, what your organization might be working on or structured like, what your project would focus on, what your understanding of environmental equities, needs, and challenges are, and how you describe what the project is that you're going to implement, making sure that's clearly described. You know, who are the people, and describing the communities that are part of the project team, and making sure that community is leading and centered in the proposal. And then outcomes and impacts, you know, how are you describing what the activities and milestones are, and are they designed and organized to make progress towards what you expect your successes to be, along with definitely advancing environmental justice and improving natural resources. So the new aspects, so there's a lot that's similar to 2022 or previous years, but this year we're excited to have community and actually past KCD grantees as part of the grant review team to do proposal evaluation alongside city staff all on the same team. to do the grant review and evaluation, to have community voice be a much stronger part of the review process, and then trying to do office hours to provide an opportunity to get technical assistance on the grant. There's also an eligibility quiz that's part of the portal. So this should be easy and straightforward. If it's not, please let us know. It's just to make sure that folks that are outside of Seattle, for example, or not doing an environmental project aren't putting in a lot of time to develop a proposal and submit it and then find out they're not eligible after. So the questions are very simple. Does your project address environmental inequities and improve natural resources? Does your project occur within Seattle city limits? Is your project led by or in deep partnership with people most impacted by environmental and natural resource issues? And is your group 501c3 nonprofit or have a fiscal sponsor? So it should be eligibility should be yes to all of those. And that gets you then into the portal to start working on your application. But want to give a heads up that that's a newer quiz part of the application process this year. So here's my contact information along with Jessica's and the link to the webpage with all these materials and more, and we'll post the recording of this to the webpage for folks to access after as well. And a few questions that were submitted in advance that I'll address, and then we'll open it up. Is there technical assistance support? So yes, that's one of the goals of the office hours, is to get technical assistance one-on-one with your application, your project concept, or the platform itself if you're having trouble with that. So sign up for office hours first, and then we can see what other support you might need. If you have a previous grant that's not complete, can you apply for this one? Yes, if you have a previous grant, you're still eligible to apply. If you have 2 previous grants that are incomplete, would definitely recommend closing one of those, contacting KCD. Having 3 open might be a challenge. So if you have 2 incomplete grants from previous grant rounds, you should definitely reach out to us first before applying. And then another question was, can we send a draft application and meet with KCD staff to receive feedback before submitting a final proposal? I think that's probably feasible. We can probably do that within office hours potentially. I will say staff probably won't be able to do direct, editing or development of your proposal. But if you want to talk about project concepts and how it aligns with, the overall goals and natural resource improvement areas, that's something that we could talk about too. But I'll have to check with Jessica actually just to make sure getting an actual draft application is something that they could commit to. So with that, I'll end here and pause the recording. And thanks everyone for logging on, for watching the recording, and for all of your environmental justice work and your work in communities to advance natural resources and improve the environment, and for considering putting in a grant application to the King Conservation Seattle Community Partnership grants. Definitely reach out if you have any questions. Thanks.
Hey, Chris,